is, and this one's called The Cobbler's Unruly Family.
Such an angry
And his wife as a teacher. What is that supposed to
Well,
mean?
look at, there's like every single kid in this thing is either wearing a terrifying mask or their face is just horrifying. But they're just beating each other up. Here's the fighting I was missing.
So again, you have to rate it. And then one of the things you have to do when you come back to your group with rating it is if there are differences, then they have to explain more. They have to either try to convince the other person. And for some reason, they did stay focused with this when I did it with the juniors. And like maybe it's just like Lauren said, it's because it didn't feel like school where they had their own little weird competition going on. But there wasn't like there wasn't any writing or reading about it, the way I see it.
Did they write in the end?
Yes.
So they were kind of recording it.
Yes, they're writing explanations, and then they had to come up with one. Right. Well, that's what it. Yes, using visual arts.
When you did this,
Kelly Gallagher last night, and there was a couple examples of things. It was very similar. It's kind of funny
Making a
to
broom.
say that. And he used this example,
Making a broom and a
picture.
rabbit.
I'm going to try it with my kids, but very similar. You put it up on the board for like 15 seconds, and then there's 3 columns. And the first column is, okay, recording which you saw on first sight. Put it back, after they've written in the column the second time, now what do you see on second look? And it's the beginning of an analysis.
Right.
And then the third time. And then they compare the things and they come
He's
up with
looking
that.
at
And
the
it's
part,
making
laying the
them
pizza
And then
on
it's
somebody.
transferring. And then there's another picture.
He's
I
like
can't remember what the image
cracking
is. It was
up.
George
We're
Washington
winding
on his
up, winding up.
dinosaur. And it reminded
With
me
a
of this.
sausage
So I was
in
just
his hand.
looking
Right,
at this last night. It
right.
was really funny.
Yeah, I
And
didn't
that-
plan it that way.
But no, it was good for me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Because I was like, oh, it's like kind of cued into that. So anyway.
Well,
That
you
same
can.
idea of trying to teach analysis.
Right.
Like, what is it? How we always say it's this, or you're going and you're probing, you connect with
Right.
the world, but what really is it?
And I think that's why kids
bigger
always
scope.
like movies better, because the visual thing is what gets you first. So if you can do it visually, then hopefully later, if you're using the same strategies, looking for what's not said, looking for whether or not it's positive or negative. That's why with freshmen I always find it funny because I have to tell them, saying I liked it. Well, no, one of the questions was how did her mother feel about coming to America? You can't say she liked it. That's just not good. It's not good enough. You're not doing an analysis. You're not making a judgment. You are needing to identify and look for whatever message that the person is trying to put forth. So, or the author, or in this case, So this is the visual arts practice. So there, like I said, there's only 2 of these though. So in the lesson, it's 7 lessons, but then we move on to the next one, which I think is really the most beneficial. It's called Think Aloud. So with the Think Aloud, this is when I miss my Elmo in here, because I do not know if I didn't include the Think Aloud in here. You have the Think Aloud, but I wish I had my. Yes. So with this one, though, he says that you need to model how to think aloud, and you don't have to use. Did I give you the teacher reference one, or just the blank? You have the teacher reference one, right? So as you're reading it together, the first thing that you would do is they don't know that you may have already have it prepared, or you have your own annotated copy. Because I think it's called annotation, but this is where he first introduces the kids to things like calls to attention, things like direct statement. So you start reading it together, and he says there, you'll see, I don't know why he encourages color. And I couldn't give you color things because we don't have a color copier or printer. But for instance, he really encourages the kids to use different colors. So in this, you'll notice it says that he tells students to mark this rupture with one of their colored pens. So, and that's what I did, and I think that this was something kids don't think about. Like, I think he says something in there about, if this is a history textbook, why are we talking about a classic tale? If you know a word like tale, we know that that means it's made up. So why are we talking about tales in a history textbook? And then what does elephants have to do with it? And they don't pay attention to it consciously, things like metaphors, until you bring it to their attention. So as you can see, you go through the whole thing, and he tells you that questions are another call to attention, and things like the word so. Who thinks about that? You know, so you do this sample think aloud to notice the conversation for this history text, which, if you see the very end, it says we present 7 metaphors that underlie modern intelligence. That's where it's leading up to. And then you ask the kids what rules to apply, the very last part. It's really about modeling. Guess what else was in the book? I wasn't going to copy that for you, but it was in the book. The Gettysburg Address.
What was it? How can I forget?
But it gets progressively harder. Like this one was just a very short piece about the man and the elephants. Then there's an excerpt from the narrative of Frederick Douglass. And then so I think the main point that you have to get across is that you're reading an excerpt from Frederick Douglass, and especially in 11th grade, isn't that even in our textbook? I know I've covered that before, like an excerpt.
Oh, is it in the test?
Is it really?
One of the linkages, it might be a one there.
So, but it's not important, and I think he writes in there something about, like, it'd be great if from 10 years from now that they would remember all the nuances they read in this, because we don't. Even expert readers don't. But what's important is to understand how this text fits into what, like now, civil rights and all of those other things. So I can always provide I'm not going into lesson 3, which is practice in miniature, but I can always provide all of these other more challenging texts. And I don't know, I don't know if you think you can use it or not, but I keep thinking, and I want to go away from the word standards, because I keep thinking that if we just use words like call to attention or things like that rather than standards, because that's what it is. I mean, basically, when he says that you have to, even when he told the story about, wasn't there a drug deal going on somewhere?
Yeah, the
all
love
that,
potion.
Right, but all that was anticipatory, setting it up. So it's not anything really new, but I do think the words are new.
Right.
And I think the way that he's going about it is new. If we teach them...
It seems more approachable.
Right. It's almost like if they know what they're doing, and I don't know how long it's going to take. One of the teachers in that second video says that it took a couple of years for her to really get kids to, I guess maybe looking at it from her experience, because she wouldn't have the same kids, right, over a couple of years. Right. But, so what do you think? Doable or not? And you don't have to, you know.
No, I think it is.
It's just, but I blame myself a lot of times that I don't follow steps the way I should. I skip steps here and there, and maybe that's why they're not learning. I'm not sure.
Well, I feel like these are
exercise. Like, it's not something I'd ever think of, but it's so true. Like, we start reading a story, and I'm like, why don't you get it? And then I think about it, I'm like, oh, maybe because I read it 45 times.
Right.
Like, they don't understand things that we read.
Yeah, and they come from such a weird place sometimes. And maybe that's why they get mad and say, I'm never going to need this. But, and I don't know that if 9th grade is even too young to be saying to them, it's not important, because I always tell them, 12 years from now, unless you're an English teacher, nobody's going to come up and ask you, so what do you think about the Julius Caesar's assassination, or things like that. A soliloquy. Who talks about soliloquies in real life? Just us. Just us. Yes.
Well, that's where you have to pay attention.
But knowing that the purpose behind it and the fact that we all do it, that's like they when you say inference, they do it all the time. They do it constantly. But when you ask them what it is, they say, I don't know, because we're not calling it that. So maybe it comes down to labels. Maybe it comes down to using colored pens, things that I don't think are very important. But I did hang these up all over the room when they did them. And I did like that they were all different, because they did put it in their own words. I gave them the actual definitions for things, but then they wrote down different examples. Quotes or a question is a call to attention.
So they defined.
Yes, I had each group do their own. I'm looking for Anthony Pateras because he was, I don't know if I have his. Maybe I got mad and threw it away because he's so self-centered. But, what?
He wasn't like that.
Oh, he's so full of himself.
Well, he's like president of Key Club.
Oh, is that really? Is that a big deal?
Well, yeah, nominated as a sophomore. Yeah, it's a big deal.
I
Especially when the
see the
seniors
struggle
wanted it.
with this. So we just finished our first unit, and it was like 2 weeks longer than I wanted it to be. This would make me stop. All right, we did something, and now I want to add depth to it. This is a mini lesson, right? So then it's just another day, and shame on me for wanting to push through. But if I wanted to bring art into this poem that I'm teaching, we did Blake, I could have easily put up 2 of his etchings and had them do something like this, but that just would have been another day where I'm like, and we're still in this unit.
Well, and I'm glad you brought up Blake, because he's songs of innocence and songs of experience, which is
I could have clearly have done this, and it would have been extremely meaningful and added to our reading, but it just would have been another day.
Well, that's what we said at the time.
But is it, Terry, because of the standards? What happened? Because in the textbook for the Crucible, how there's that big landscape green. It looks like a big, from colony to country, right? Yeah. And there's that one little man. I used to spend so much time just on that image. I always appreciated the images in the textbook that you could say, now, how is this? And that's something, what I used to do, the first time I gave them the textbook, I'd make them go through it and find an image that jumped out at them and why it did. But I don't have that kind of time anymore.
Could you imagine if our Crucible unit was 1 day longer?
No.
Yeah. They would have been throwing rocks at us.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So
here's a lesson for you.
They wanted to crush you with stones.
if anybody has a question, that's fine. If you don't have a question, if you want to ask me for any of these materials, or
did you look at the fiction book? You said he had one for fiction.
I did it because I agree with him in that kids know fiction. Yeah. They know what to look. They know characters. When kids say to me after they've read an article, the story says, I said, what story? Where's the characters here? Where's your plot?
Oh my God, they do it in poetry too.
Yes.
Yeah, the story. Yeah. The story. I'm like, why not reading a story? What?
Susan, how long does it take you to go through these rules?
These rules? You mean where I got to this point?
Yeah.
This whole thing took me about a week.
Okay. Oh, okay.
With doing the think aloud, doing the 2 pieces
so you did
of
a
art.
Bunch of mini lessons.
Yes. But it wasn't the whole period, because I had to do something else in there.
Right.
And then, of course, all that the group stuff. I don't know how it's going to work with the freshmen. I just don't. I can see a couple of the classes. I have the allied health. I have 18 allied health girls. Well, no, and 1 boy, 2 boys. So they are very, very silly this year. I mean, really silly.
Oh, really?
Really silly.
Silly.
They're silly. They're very silly.
Yeah, because I don't get that from Allied.
Yeah. A lot of giggling, a lot of...
So silly.
Well, you've seen that at 9-10 class. There are a lot of... They're goofball. Yeah, they're silly. They're just a lot of good...
I don't think English should be during that period 9-10. I've decided.
You know that I have my best class is my freshman class